Welcome to Tash Talks Soul. Hello, hope you're having a lovely day. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different to the other things I've been talking about so far, and that is whales. I was on Facebook scrolling last night and I came across this post that was saying something pretty interesting and it got my cogs turning. So it was saying that whales have powers, that their field of perception is almost the entire ocean. They can pick up calls from thousands of miles away, and their voices can carry just as far. That apparently there's a known phenomenon when humans hear whale song that it can trigger profound emotional experience, and there's anecdotal evidence of it stopping babies from crying, it soothing babies in the womb, it relaxing women in labor or people who are dying. People can just burst into tears when they hear it, or they can feel really, calm and relaxed and just moved emotionally. So we don't know why this happens, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about this. And when whales are singing or calling, that they are bathing 70% of the earth in high frequency vibrations known to heal and benefit all biological life forms, and that whales play a very important and specific role in the earth's consciousness. So interesting to think about. Hey, given that they live in the ocean, which covers, a large portion of the earth, 70% according to that tile. I don't actually know the exact percentage, so we'll go with 70%. And the fact that they can send and receive calls from thousands of miles, kilometers, long way away. So I jumped onto Google and I started reading about this because I thought it was so interesting, not only from a scientific biological perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective. So from a spiritual lens, something that came up in my Googling was Laurie Rayon. So she is an internationally known interspecies communicator and soul healer. And what she does is she speaks to animals and then she translates the messages. But she talks a lot about whales and dolphins. And she speaks of them as being ancient beings and master healers on this planet, that they have been on our earth for millions, hundreds of millions of years in their physical form, and that their role on this planet is to bathe the earth in their vibrational frequencies and in that way upgrade our DNA on a cellular level, on a molecular level, that just to wash over us with the whale song and to heal us. Most of the whale song that we hear just, socially out. What am I talking about? I often hear whale song socially just while I'm out. What I mean to say is if you Google whale song or if you hear a whale song recording playing somewhere, what you are most likely hearing is the male of the species, their mating song. So supposedly they change their song and sing a new one every year, and it is a series of perfectly repeated, I don't know what to call it, but groupings of sounds that are then perfectly replicated and repeated, sometimes for hours and sometimes for days. I think from my reading, I saw that 23 hours was the longest recorded whale song. But, what do we know? We're not in the ocean recording every single whale as they're singing their song. But supposedly the whale song that we hear is a recording of the male's mating song, but they communicate in many other ways as well. So the first claim that I wanted to look into was, is it true that whale song can travel thousands of miles? Surely not. I mean, that's an enormous distance. And so apparently sound waves can actually travel faster and a lot further through water than what they can through air. So apparently it's roughly 1,500 meters per second in seawater compared to just 340 meters per second in air. Now, disclaimer, this has M. I don't know if this is meters or miles, so I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I mean, big disclaimer right there. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just me repeating what I've read because I thought it was super duper interesting. But even whatever, meters, miles, 1,500 versus 340 tells us that it's, more than 4 times faster that this sound is traveling through the water. Um, and the reason for that is because sound is created by waves of vibration that pass through a space or a medium. So, whether that is water or air, and because the atoms in liquids are more tightly packed together than in gases, so obviously air being a gas, water being a liquid, sound travels much faster through the ocean. Apparently, as well, there is actually a channel that exists in the ocean that amplifies and carries further these signals. So, this band of water is something that is called the deep sound channel, or otherwise known as the SOFAR channel for sound fixing and ranging channel. And because of the physical properties of the ocean, sound waves diminish in volume very quickly if they're close to the surface because it kind of scatters and bounces off and refracts, and it can't travel for as long a distance. But at varying depths below the surface, depending on how deep, sound waves pretty much don't suffer very little. They suffer very little transmission loss and actually increase in the speed at which they travel. So the military actually uses this in submarine warfare, by strategically using this channel. It was first discovered in the 1940s when the military was listening for Soviet subs thousands of kilometers away, but whales can actually use this horizontal band of water to get their songs to travel for thousands of kilometers. And before our military figured out how to use the acoustic properties of our oceans to send signals, whales have been using this to communicate with each other over huge distances. So as an example, the call of in this example, it was a fin whale, may travel 250 kilometers at the surface, but more than 6,000 kilometers in the deep sound channel, which is crazy. So if they're near the surface, their calls will bounce off the surface and quickly dissipate. But once they go deep, because of the physical refraction of the ocean, the energy, the vibration of their calls gets trapped in this layer and it can travel further and faster. And this is how, and the example that was being given was that you can hear blue whales singing off the coast of Ireland with a hydrophone placed in the water in Virginia, which is crazy to think about. So, but whales don't only use their call to communicate with each other, they also use it to navigate. So they listen to the echoes of their calls bouncing off very distant ocean shelves and coastlines and other, structures within the ocean, and they can create mental maps of the ocean by doing so. The whales don't move in random directions. They go straight for the features that show up on their personal sonar. And it's not even so much echolocation, it's like echo mapping or echouraging, which is the scientist explaining it, that they can actually create a map of the ocean. And the scientist continues to say that in his work, he had to completely change his sense of time and space because sound waves can travel 25 kilometers in just 1 minute. So if a sound has to travel 250 miles to hit something, it will take 10 minutes to hit it and then 10 minutes to come back. And us as a species, we're a little bit impatient. So we aren't used to waiting 20 minutes to hear an echo. But whales are, and they can do this, and they can create huge acoustic maps of their environments. And it's just so interesting. Don't you think this is so interesting? And so not only do these whales emit calls that travel further than any other voice in the animal kingdom, they can also create the loudest voices than any creature on Earth. So there's a world record that a call of a blue whale can reach 180 decibels, which is as loud as a jet plane, which is crazy to think of something booming so loud under the surface. Additionally, so their hearing range, so we as humans can hear sounds ranging from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Dolphins can hear up to 160,000 hertz, which is beyond what dogs can hear. And they can hear very high pitches that we cannot hear, up to 44,000 hertz. So, I mean, all animals use sound to some degree, but they have huge range. And blue whales, for example, can make very, very low calls at just 14 hertz in frequency, so completely invisible to our hearing. And because lower frequency sounds travel a lot further and they scatter a lot less, and they don't distort and they don't lose the transmission, whales can communicate with each other over thousands of kilometers. It's amazing. The other thing about whale song, not all whales actually communicate the same way. So whales have a form of culture. So whales from different regions will actually have different songs from year to year, and all the males will be singing the same song. So interestingly, though, as a collective, they can change their song. So they might be singing one version of the song, and then within a week, all of the males within that area, within that location, will synchronize with each other, and they will form a new pattern of sounds that they make that form the mating song for that year. Now, another interesting thing that I read about was how whale song was discovered. So in ancient times, or not so ancient times, when sailors were sailing through the oceans, they were known to hear the calls of whales through the hulls of their ships. And they probably didn't know what they were hearing. And, you might think maybe they thought they were hearing mermaids singing that, alluring siren song that you hear about in, stories, sailors' stories. But scientists only discovered whale song in the 1950s, which is not very long ago. American scientists who were stationed in Bermuda heard the calls while listening for Russian submarines. And then for apparently 15 years, the Navy kept the knowledge of whale songs a secret until an engineer gave recordings of the songs to a biologist who specialized in bat and owl sounds, vocalizations. And this scientist, his name was Watlington, he discovered that whale songs consisted of a series of phrases that would be repeated perfectly over and over, which is kind of what we were talking about just a minute ago. And so when this became public knowledge and people started listening to recordings of whale songs coming out, it actually kickstarted the environmental movement because so many people became aware that whales could sing these incredible songs and that humans had actually been killing them in droves. And in the 70s, there were huge protests about putting an end to commercial whaling. and because at the time whale numbers were being driven into extinction. So, without meaning to, military research actually led to conservation movements of our beloved whales. In addition, you might have heard that the military had worked with dolphins, and I'd heard these stories that they would train dolphins to knock enemy divers into the chest so they would lose their ability to breathe through their scuba gear underwater, and that they were trained to hunt for mines and to stick explosives onto enemy ships and to stab enemy divers with needles of carbon dioxide and just crazy, crazy things. And apparently, there's still a dolphin unit which supposedly spends about $20 million a year on more than 100 dolphins near San Diego, which is pretty interesting. And apparently the military wants to stop using them, but we just don't have technology with sonar that is as good as theirs. Dolphins can reliably detect mines that have been buried in sand, and they don't give false alarms. They don't have inaccurate spottings where it ends up being like a stone or something, or something that's not a mine. Apparently dolphins can tell a fish thousands of meters away. They know how big that fish is based on their sonar telling them how big the swim bladder of that fish is, and based on the size they know the size of the fish. They can tell the shape of an object behind a screen using their sonar, and we just do not have technology that is that good. And apparently as well, so these animals in the wild, they make sounds that are up to 100 times louder than the animals that we have in captivity. And the only animals really that we have been able to study are the ones that have been in captivity. So that tells us that animals can actually vary the sound of their calls to suit their environment. And so that's why animals in tanks are so much quieter than their wild counterparts. And the other interesting thing is because whale brains and dolphin brains actually are hugely developed, they are privileged to personhood. So humans are privileged to personhood. We're considered persons because we meet a certain criteria and meet a certain set of characteristics. So we're self-aware, intelligent, complex, autonomous, cultured, as just a few examples. And so if we accept that definition, and versions of this are used around the world in constitutions and other legislation, then this tells us that whales and dolphins actually also qualify. So they qualify to be non-human persons. And in the University of Hawaii, Lou Herman has actually proved that dolphins are capable of complex problem solving. They can have amazing abilities for learning, memory, creativity. There's a well-known anecdote, which I did not know prior to reading up about this, but there was an aquarium dolphin who was rewarded by his trainers for retrieving bits of rubbish in the water. So he would get a little fishy treat every time he brought them a piece of rubbish. And so what he did, the clever little bugger, he stashed a whole newspaper at the bottom of the aquarium and was deliberately swimming back to it, ripping off a tiny little piece of paper and then bringing it back to his trainers to get a fish. And then the next time he wanted a fish, he'd go back to his newspaper, rip off another little piece, and then go back for a fish. So they are incredibly, incredibly clever. And with whale brains, we've only been studying whale brains supposedly for only 20 years, but their brain is huge. So it's second only to a human with our brain to body ratio size. But it also contains many, now I need to read this bit, braided cell structures and areas of dense connectivity. And the term for this is convoluted, which means that the cortex folds in on itself to increase the surface area inside the skull, giving the brain its ridged appearance. The brains of less intelligent animals are much smoother. So most of you are probably familiar with what the human brain looks like, and it does have those ridges and indentations because to maximize surface area and be able to store more information and abilities and connections, it needs that. And so the whale brain has that. But on top of that, its history is very different from that of ours, mammals and primates. So 35 million years ago, the whale brain began arranging its parts into a very unique layout and structure. So what that means is that it's a very alternative evolutionary route to complex intelligence. So it processes emotions in the limbic system, which for us processes emotions. This part of the whale brain is actually a lot more convoluted than our own. So, convoluted is when it folds back in on itself to create more surface area. So, it is so big. This is such a big part of their brain that it actually erupts into the cortex in the form of an extra paralimbic lobe. And the location of this lobe suggests that it's involved in this unique cross function blend between emotional and cognitive thinking. So maybe some form of social communication and self-awareness at a level that we cannot even begin to understand because our brains are so different. So isn't it incredible to think how whales actually perceive the world? And there's a lot of observations and studies that have been done on whale behavior, and they are probably, possibly, even more so than humans, the most socially connected, communicative, coordinated social mammals on the planet. So even killer whales, they don't kill or seriously harm each other in the wild, even though, just like with humans, there's competition for prey and for mates, and there's disagreements and disputes like any other species, and yet they're able to resolve that in a much more socially conducive way. And their social rules pretty much prohibit violence, real violence, and they seem to have worked out how to socially coordinate and manage themselves and figure out how to exist as a society and do it in a largely peaceful way, which props to them, because as humans, with all of our intelligence and all of our brains, we still haven't figured out how to do. And interesting point on the social aspect is with the incredible ability of the sonar systems, they could see the internal organs of all the other members of the group. They can literally see what you had for breakfast, who is, sexually receptive, who is pregnant, if somebody's sick or there's something wrong. So imagine the impact that would have on a society socially if every single person that you saw on the street, you could see exactly what was going on with them. Who had cancer, who was pregnant, who had something, who ate something, what somebody ate for breakfast or dinner, or everything, if they were in pain, if there was something going on there. How interesting is that? And I wonder, food for thought, how that would impact our society if we had that level of insight into each other, whether we would bond together more and be more compassionate and more socially cooperative if we had that level of insight into each other. It's just really interesting to think about. So, the other interesting thing about the way that whales communicate is they are able to eavesdrop on other whales' calls. So remember we were talking about how they can send these huge calls over thousands of kilometers or miles or whatever halfway across the planet, and they could hear it coming back. They could effectively map the ocean. They can also eavesdrop on other whales' calls that are also mapping the ocean. So then, in theory, how interesting is this to think about? They can actually see the world through each other's eyes. They can all be privy to each other's ocean mapping, echo mapping and worldview, where they are, what they're seeing, what the state of the ocean is in the place where they are. Imagine being able to tap into, I don't even know what a comparable parallel would be for humans, but if you could see out of the eyes of any other human on the planet, that you could just listen in and hijack their sensory input from around their environment, wherever they are in the world, and you can piggyback on that. It kind of introduces, a really interesting concept of interconnectedness and all being one. And there's group think and there's group consciousness. And yeah, this I just find it absolutely fascinating. This interdependence, interconnectedness. It's just, I don't think really that we have any idea as humans, really. So if you have a group of whales that are a great distance from each other, they might, in some sense, actually be part of one sensory loop. So every single change, twitch, movement in the wide world, in the whole ocean, that they're able to create this sensory grid where at any given point they know what's happening literally anywhere in the world. And in terms of healing, using whale song for healing, we know about various frequencies helping our bodies heal, and it impacts our DNA, helps us process things emotionally, heals us on a cellular level. We had an episode about Schumann resonances and the Earth's heartbeat, and that was at, I think it was 7 hertz at that frequency. Imagine what it would be like to just be bathed in whale song, what that would be doing to our bodies and to our DNA, and how that would affect us energetically and spiritually. And, are the whales guardians of this planet, and they are here to consistently add to the vibrations of our planet, not only on land, but in the oceans. It's just interesting to think about the impact that all has and whether there is something to it. Something to think about. I must say it was a little bit tricky to find interesting articles to read about this, because most of them were through a scientific lens. But if you have come across this before, or you found an interesting article, please send it my way, because I'd love to learn more about this. I've often thought, and I've had lots of interesting discussions with the people in my life about our oceans. I actually have a friend, a coworker, who was saying that if we ruin our oceans, like, oceans are the secret to life, that if we damage our oceans, we've effectively killed the planet, that all of the answers to everything lies in our oceans, and that we have to look after them. And it's just so interesting to think of whales, this incredible species, having such amazing access to our oceans and such amazing oversight, and effectively, like, that grid that I just spoke about, being able to know what's happening anywhere at any given point. It's just incredible. So I can't say I'm a huge activist, but I've always been passionate about our oceans. And usually when I support charities, my charities of choice are, funnily enough, always ocean related. Cleaning up rubbish, conservation efforts. I love the Sea Bin charity, which is actually, I think, a local Australian one, where they put bins in our big ports and harbours and collect rubbish so that our wildlife, sea life is looked after. But very passionate about it. So if you have any more information, please let me know. I'd love to learn more. I will leave you to think about all of these really interesting concepts. And I am going to go and edit this episode and pretend that I'm editing whale song. Have a great day. Bye.